All year the ship had been trapped, ice pushing and pinching the hull, the wood howling in protest. Finally, on October 27th, 1915, the crew's worst fears came true. A new wave of pressure rippled across the ice, lifting the ship's stern and tearing off its rudder and its keel. Freezing water began to rush in. "She's going, boys," came the cry. "It's time to get off." From the moment Ernest Shackleton and his crew aboard the British expedition ship HMS Endurance had become immobilized in Antarctica's ice 10 months earlier, they had been preparing for this moment. Now, those on board removed their last remaining belongings from the ship and set up camp on the ice. 25 days later, what remained of the wreck convulsed once more, and the Endurance disappeared beneath the ice. Incredibly, all 27 men under Shackleton's command would survive the grueling Antarctic expedition, but their ship remained sunk and lost to history until 106 years later. On March 9, 2022, a team of scientists and adventurers announced they had finally located what remained of the Endurance at the bottom of Antarctica's Weddell Sea. The team made the discovery using submersibles and undersea drones, and released stunning photos of the long-lost wooden ship, where it had lodged in the seabed nearly 10,000 feet deep in clear and icy waters. Our story begins with Sir Ernest Shackleton, born on February 15, 1874, in County Kildare, Ireland, to Anglo-Irish parents. The second of 10 children and the oldest son, he was raised in London, where his family moved when Shackleton was a young boy. Despite the urging of his father that he follow in his footsteps and go to medical school, the 16-year-old Shackleton joined the Merchant Navy, achieving the rank of first mate by the age of 18, and becoming a certified master mariner 6 years later. Those early years in the Merchant Navy saw Shackleton travel extensively. In 1901, he joined noted British naval officer and explorer Robert Falcon Scott on a difficult trek to the South Pole that placed the two men, plus one other, closer to the pole than anyone else previously. The trip, however, ended poorly for Shackleton, who fell seriously ill and had to return home. Upon his return to England, Shackleton pursued a career in journalism. Later, he was tapped to be the secretary to the Scottish Geographical Society. He also made an unsuccessful attempt at becoming a member of Parliament, but his dreams and his passions lay with the South Pole. Shackleton's South Pole expedition with Scott sparked within the young explorer an obsession to reach the Antarctic. In 1907, he made another attempt at achieving his goal, but again, he fell short, coming within 97 miles of the pole before brutal conditions forced him to turn back. In 1911, Shackleton's dreams of becoming the first person to set foot on the South Pole was shattered when Norwegian explorer Roald Amundsen reached the Earth's most southerly point. The achievement forced Shackleton to set his sights on a new mark, crossing Antarctica via the South Pole. On August 1, 1914, the same day Germany declared war on Russia, Shackleton departed London on the ship Endurance for his third trip to the South Pole. The Endurance was a 144-foot, three-masted wooden ship. By late fall, the crew had reached South Georgia, an island in the southern Atlantic. On December 5th, the team departed the island, the last time Shackleton and his men would touch land for an astonishing 497 days. Endurance had left South Georgia for Antarctica on December 5, 1914, carrying 27 men, plus one stowaway, who became the ship's steward, 69 dogs, and a tomcat erroneously dubbed Mrs. Jippy. The goal of the expedition's leader was to establish a base on Antarctica's Weddell Sea coast. From there, a small party, including himself, would set out on the first crossing of the continent, ultimately arriving at the Ross Sea, south of New Zealand, where another group would be waiting for them, having laid depots of food and fuel along the way. Just 2 days after leaving South Georgia, and within a day's sailing of their landing place, the Endurance entered the pack ice, the barrier of thick ice that stands guard around the Antarctic continent. For several weeks, the ship poked and prodded its way through leads in the ice, gingerly making its way south. But on January 18th, a northerly gale pressed the pack hard against the land and pushed the floes tightly against each other. Suddenly, there was no way forward, nor any way back. The Endurance was beset, in the words of one of the crew, frozen like an almond in the middle of a chocolate bar. One of the ship's surgeons, Alexander Macklin, wrote, "Shackleton did not rage at all, or show outwardly signs of disappointment. He told us simply and calmly that we must winter in the pack ice. He explained its dangers and possibilities, and never lost his optimism and prepared for the winter. In private, however, he revealed a bit of his worry, expressing to the ship's captain, Frank Worsley, "The ship can't live like this. It may be a few months, and it may only be a question of weeks, or even days. But what the ice gets, the ice keeps." The Endurance became trapped in the ice, and drifted for 10 months before being crushed by the massive ice floes. In that time, they salvaged as many provisions as they could, while sacrificing anything and everything that added weight or would consume valuable resources, including books, clothing, tools, and keepsakes. Some of the younger dogs, too small to pull their own weight, were shot, as was, to the great dismay of many, the unfortunate Mrs. Chippy. "The loss of the ship meant more to us than we could ever put into words," Shackleton wrote. After the ship had finally sunk below the waves, the group worked on devising a plan to escape. Their initial idea was to march across the ice toward real land, but that was abandoned after the men managed a mere 7.5 miles in 7 days. "There was no alternative," wrote Shackleton, "but to camp once more on the floe and to possess our souls with what patience we could till conditions should appear more favorable for a renewal of the attempt to escape." Slowly and steadily, the ice drifted farther to the north, and on April 7, 1916, the snow-capped peaks of Clarence and Elephant Islands came into view. "The floe has been a good friend to us," wrote Shackleton in his diary, "but it is reaching the end of its journey, and is liable at any time to break up." 2 days later, just that happened. On April 9th, it began splitting beneath them with what those present described as an almighty crack. Shackleton gave the order to break camp and launch the boats. All at once, they left the ice they had been camping on for so long. In their time on the water, they faced brutal conditions. The ocean threw freezing spray in their faces, tossing frigid water over the crew. It battered the boats from side to side, and many of the men found themselves in the fetal position, protecting themselves from both the cold and seasickness. The men were all exhausted. Worsley had by that point not slept for 80 hours. On April 15th, they made it to the shores of the Elephant Islands. Although the group was overjoyed that they had reached the first dry land since leaving South Georgia over a year earlier, there was little hope of any actual rescue on the island, which was far outside normal shipping routes of the time. 9 days after they reached the island, Shackleton came to a conclusion. Seeing that his men were put in more danger with every passing day, Shackleton led a small team out on the water once again. They boarded one of their 22-foot lifeboats and navigated their way toward South Georgia, more than 800 miles away. On the water, they faced horrible conditions. The boat tossed interminably on the big waves under the gray, threatening skies, recorded Shackleton. Every surge of the sea was an enemy to be watched and circumvented. As they neared their destination, the elements reached their worst. The wind simply shrieked as it tore the tops off the waves, Shackleton wrote, down into the valleys, up to the tossing heights, straining on the seams of the sails till they tore open. The next day, the wind eased off and they made it ashore, but this too was not the end. The storms had pushed them off course, and they had landed on the other side of the island from the whaling station. And so, Shackleton, Worsley, and Tom Crean set off to reach it by foot, climbing over mountains and sliding down glaciers, forging a path that no human had ever forged before. Until, after 36 hours of desperate hiking, they staggered into the station at Stromness. The Norwegian whalers watched as 3 strangers appeared from nowhere at the whaling station. Their hair and beard stringy and matted, their faces blackened with soot from the blubber stoves they used to keep warm, and creased from nearly 2 years of constant stress. On August 25, 1916, Shackleton returned to Elephant Island to rescue the remaining crew members. Amazingly, not a single member of his 28-man team died during the nearly 2 years they were stranded. While Shackleton and his crew made it back to England, their ship did not. For more than a century, the Endurance remained among history's most elusive shipwrecks. But on March 5, 2022, an international team of marine archaeologists, explorers, and scientists located the Endurance using sonar at the bottom of the Weddell Sea, just 4 miles south of the position originally recorded when the Endurance sank. "We have made polar history with the discovery of the Endurance, and successfully completed the world's most challenging shipwreck search," said John Shears, the leader of the Endurance 22. Photos released from the Endurance 22 expedition revealed the sunken three-masted ship in mesmerizing detail, including an image of its stern, where its name Endurance was visible above a five-pointed star. An underwater robot called Sabretooth dove nearly 10,000 feet recording footage of the well-preserved vessel. The Antarctic Treaty protects this shipwreck as a historic site and monument, so the explorers could only look, not touch. Ironically enough, the harshness of the Antarctic seas both sank the Endurance and preserved it like no other shipwreck. A vessel made of wood is supposed to quickly rot thanks to microbes and critters called shipworms, which grow up to 5 feet long as they chew through wood. But Antarctica is devoid of trees, which means there aren't organisms in its surrounding waters that have evolved to break down wood for nutrients. Vincent has been at this kind of work for decades and has seen hundreds of shipwrecks, but none quite like this. The level of preservation of this wreck is absolutely gorgeous. It's like she sunk yesterday. This is something that we see one time in a life. Only one time. Incredible. Thank you for watching Learn Something New. If you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe. And also be sure to check out some of the other videos on the channel, like why Russia sold Alaska to the United States, or how New York City is overcoming its trash problem. As always, thank you, and see you next time.